Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Susan Ford Bales.
Good afternoon, and I have to say I was on that ship in June, and it's come a long way, and it looks pretty darn cool. So thank you all today. Mr. Mayor Hartwell and his wife Susan, Doug, thank you. Wally Tett, Reverend Holgram, Red, thank you. Foundation trustees, Joe and Donna Calvaruso, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the William E. Simon Lecture. Dad was so proud of this lecture series and its distinguished namesake, Secretary Bill Simon. Today, we add a special chapter to Bill's lecture series. I've thought a lot about how to best describe the special place that Paul O'Neill had in the hearts of Dad and Mother, and continues to have in our family. Ladies and gentlemen, it has not been an easy task. As many of you will remember, Dad was, shall we say, frugal. And when he moved to Washington, he didn't leave behind his West Michigan financial discipline. And he most certainly had discipline front and center every day of his presidency. Historians have begun to recognize and admire Dad's remarkable understanding of the federal budget. His deep understanding was matched by his determination to keep federal spending in check. As president, Dad did something that seems unthinkable in this internet age. Each year, he personally presented at the press briefing his administration's annual budget. So needless to say, that would be a huge undertaking to any president. But it was particularly so in 1974 because the total economic mess that Dad inherited. But let me share with you a secret. Yes, Dad's knowledge of the budget was enormous. But it was increased many, many times over with the assistance of an extraordinary cabinet and White House staff. And in particular, there was one among those extraordinary advisors who was essential to Dad's budget success. That extraordinary advisor is our special guest today, Paul O'Neill. Each year in the White House at budget time, Dad would spend countless hours with Paul and his colleagues from the Office of Management and Budget. And when their budget was concluded, Dad personally presented the budget to the American people. And every year, Dad did so with confidence, complete confidence. His confidence was unshakable because of the simple fact of Paul O'Neill put his name behind every budget. And in Dad's mind, that said it all. Paul O'Neill's word was always good, always. Because Dad, and for Dad, if he and Paul O'Neill's word, nothing more needed to be said. Dad's admiration for Paul didn't stop when the two of them left the White House, and far from it. Dad's admiration and friendship with Paul grew even stronger. Dad would often remark that he was blessed with many joys, but none was greater than to witness in the future years the distinguished service the men and women of his White House staff and administration went on to give to the American people. Consider just a few from the distinguished list. George H.W. Bush, Henry Kissinger, Brent Scowcroft, Bob Gates, Dick Cheney, Carla Hills, Don Rumsfeld, Jim Baker, and our guest, Paul O'Neill. Paul, You are a shining example of why columnist David Broder concluded, quote, "In an odd and inexplicable way, the truth has begun to dawn on the American people that Gerald Ford was the kind of president they always wanted and didn't know that they had," end quote. The decades of pride you brought to Dad and Mom are gifts from which there are simply not adequate words to describe. Paul, your friendship they always treasured, and yours is a friendship I too will always hold dear. So it is a personal honor and joy to introduce an extraordinary public servant, a man of humility and unbending integrity, a man who has dedicated his life to America's economic strength and well-being. So I'm proud to say one of the dearest friends of the 38th President of the United States ever had. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Paul O'Neill.
I wonder if you could humor me if you've got control of the lights and turn the house lights up so that I can see the eyes of the people I'm talking to. Thank you so much. You know, I hate being blinded, and you can't tell whether people are looking at their cell phone or not when the lights are off. So, Susan, thank you so much. It's hard not to be emotional after that. I didn't bring you a tome and a weighty, numbers-filled set of ideas to burden you with today. I didn't think that was appropriate. I just thought I would do what I really enjoy most, and that is talking from the heart about President Ford. I said earlier today at the commemoration ceremony, I never felt I worked for President Ford. He made me feel every day that I worked with him. And if you can imagine, you know, I was recounting last night as we were having dinner. I initially went to Washington in 1961 when I was recruited as a management intern and left graduate school in Claremont, California, and promised my wife we'd only stay 18 months. And that didn't work out just exactly like I said. But I went because, you know, I had studied economics in undergraduate school, and I was working on a doctoral program in economics at Claremont Graduate School. And I was really taken with the idea that, you know, life needs to be about something, and there needs to be a way to make a contribution. And so when President Kennedy gave his inaugural speech and basically said, if you want to make a difference, come here and help. And so when I had an opportunity to go in actually July the 3rd of 1961, and this is a little personal inside stuff. The reason the 3rd was so important is because, of course, the 4th was a holiday. They let me come to work on the 3rd, and I got paid an extra day. So in those days, if you were an entry-level, actually a mid-level career civil servant, you got paid $6,435 a year, whether you needed it or not. And so an extra day was really welcome, especially coming out of a graduate school. But, you know, I didn't know exactly how I was going to be able to make a contribution, but I was pretty sure if you did a good job and you took advantage of opportunities. I had opportunities to go to IBM computer programming in school when computers were still so big they'd hardly fit in this room. Not like your cell phone today. So I had that opportunity, and I had opportunity to go to a night school at George Washington University and do more graduate work. And people gave me assignments that were really helpful to me. I think I went to work, I didn't say it, at the Veterans Administration because they offered this, in effect, continuation of graduate school. And the first year that I was there, my boss told me mid-October, I want you to draft remarks for President Kennedy for Veterans Day. And I tell you, it was such an enormous thing because for the first time, someone asked me to think like a president. Not what I say, but what would a president say, and what would the rhythm of that president's language be? You know, and I found that was a really, in a way, a life-changing idea to think about what the country should do about important public policy issues and ceremonies to remember the history of our country. And so I was endlessly having these kind of opportunities, and I didn't know that they would eventually be pearls that made a necklace, but you know, there were little things along the way that were a privilege. So you can't imagine what it was like, or maybe you can, when President Ford became vice president even, and I had known him and done a little work with him when he was the minority leader in the House. He was always interested in why, you know, so that he didn't want somebody to tell him, you know, here's this issue and this is what we should do about it. He wanted to know, maybe he'd let you tell him after you told him all the facts you had at your command and what all of the possible policy things were. It was a privilege for him to say to you, and what would you do? But he didn't want the answer, he wanted the knowledge. And so for someone who went to Washington with the idea that we could make a difference with ideas and facts and knowledge and insight, it was like, you know, the last stop before heaven working for Gerald R. Ford, because that's what he was like every day. You know, never in my time with him, in or out of the government, did I find him diminishing people with remarks or disrespect. It wasn't in his nature, you know, so I was delighted, I have to tell you, I was delighted when he was given the Profiles in Courage Award by the Kennedy family tradition, because no one deserved it more than he did for the Nixon pardon, when I would say 80% of the people thought it was the wrong decision at the time he made it. But, you know, I've often thought to myself, that it was the right thing to do, and it's nice that he was finally honored for it, and we're kind of straightening out history. But I tell you my insight about Gerald R. Ford. I don't think it was a profile in courage, because it came from his calibration, from his value system of what's the right thing to do for the American people. It wasn't a calculation. He couldn't help himself. Really, think about it. The things that he did in his life, he didn't labor over them and wring his hands about, oh my God, is this the right decision? Once he thought he had knowledge and command of the facts and the best possible opinions, he was serene in his decision making. It was a wonderful thing to be part of. You know, and so I think, I was asked yesterday in a television interview, why do you keep coming back here? You know, so I feel that I have an honor and an opportunity and obligation to help people understand and carry forward to young people the greatness of this human being that, You know, it's not that he was a saint, but by God, he was pretty close. You know, and when I say that to you, I think I'm not speaking for myself as an individual. Those of us who were privileged to sit at the corner of his desk, some of you saw the pictures while we were having lunch. It was just a remarkable time in life to be in a place where everything that was being done mattered a lot. The economy was in a disastrous condition. And to be there with someone whose rudder was knowledge and facts, and every question framed by this proposition, at the end of the day, what's the right thing to do that will advance the American society? I would say if Gerald Ford were here today, he would say to you, he would agree, that's how I thought about things. How do I, by my actions and my pursuit of knowledge, do things that will make this a better society for us and for the generations to follow? Fabulous human being. Now, we have a Q&A session, but, you know, I'm a radical in a way, and I do things that are unexpected. So today I want to do something you didn't expect to encounter, and hopefully you will take it away fondly. So I want to tell you a story. Some of you know for a long time I've been deeply involved in health and medical affairs in many different ways. And one of the things that I do is to be a board member of the Lucy and Leap Institute in Boston, which is a part of the National Patient Safety Foundation. So I'm one who believes if we could help ourselves to do the right thing every day in health and medical care, we could make an enormous difference, because right now there are 2 million people every year who get an infection when they go into a hospital, and I'm here to tell you every one of them is preventable if we did things right. You know, there's demonstration that this is true. You know, so there are a bunch of those kind of things. So one of the things I do, as I said, I'm associated with the National Patient Safety Foundation. And when my wife and I were coming back from our winter place, where we go, we don't actually own a place, but where we go and stay in a condominium overlooking Waikiki Beach for January and February. Thank God we were there this past winter, because it was unbelievable in Pittsburgh. I don't know if the weather we got came from here, but if it did, God bless you. Anyway, we were coming back, and the reason we were coming back at the end of February because there was a board member of this board members meeting, winter meeting of this Lucy and Leap Institute in San Diego. And so we arrived in San Diego, I think, on February the 28th. And my wife has relatives there, so she went to dinner with them. I went to dinner with my fellow board members. And we're sitting there having dinner. And about 15 minutes into dinner, one of my fellow board members across the table, Susan Erdman Levitan, and her husband, sitting down here a couple of seats from me, and she said, Richard and I were talking, don't we remember that you have a serious past affiliation involvement with President Ford? And I said, yes, that's right, and I explained it to her. And she said, well, that's what we thought. And so we want to send you something. And I said, okay, tell me about it. And she said, well, Richard and I have been living in this townhouse on Beacon Hill for a long time, and our family had grown up, and our daughter, one of our daughters, had gone away and went to Africa and came back and brought a bunch of paintings with her. But we decided we needed to clean up our attic. And so the two of us went up to the attic, and we find this bundle wrapped in brown craft paper. And we said, well, you know, we got to get rid of stuff. Let's look and see what this is. So they commenced opening up this bundle of paintings, and they're mostly African landscapes that their daughter had brought back from her semester in South Africa or somewhere. And then they stopped and they said, she said to Richard, "Richard, look at this." And he said, "What is it?" And she said, "Look at this." And she showed him, this is a picture of President Ford. It's a portrait of President Ford. And they said, "Wow, it looks like a pretty good portrait. How could it get here with our daughter's paintings from South Africa that were bundled up from the framer that we never looked at when they came?" And so they said, "Well, we've got to figure this out." So they called the framer. 3 years passed when he'd done this work, and told him that they had this painting and how could they have gotten confused with their daughter's South African paintings, and would he please look into it and get back to them. And so after about 3 weeks, he called them back and said, "I have checked every way I know how, and I can't figure it out. And so the painting is yours." And they said, "Oh my goodness." So at the dinner now in San Diego, they said to me, "So this is the story of how we came about this painting, and we thought you had this connection with the Ford family, and so we want you to have it because we're sure you'll do the right thing with it. We don't know what that is, but you'll know." So I said, "Sure." And I figured they'd send it to me and it would be something done by a 17-year-old in a finger painting class. And so after about 3 weeks, my wonderful assistant, Janice Saladonia, in Pittsburgh, said one morning, "Mr. O'Neill, there's a package here for you from Federal Express." And I said, "Well, open it up, Janice." So my office has a long hallway, and at the end of the hallway by the entry from outside, there's a mail, file room and all of that. And Janice is in there, and I hear her opening up the package, and then she's kind of squealing, and she came kind of trotting down the hall, and I said, "What is it, Janice?" And she said, "You aren't going to believe this. Look at this." And she turned the painting around, and it's this magnificent painting of Gerald R. Ford, a painting that captures the character of the president whose desk I sat at for 2.5 years. It is fantastic. And so I said, "Wow, I didn't expect this." So I looked at the painting, and it says on it, "Margaret Holland Sargent." So, having learned a little bit about technology, I got on my iPhone and, Googled Margaret Holland Sargent, and what comes up are a whole series of paintings, including a little thumbnail of Gerald R. Ford. And it says, this portrait is in the National Portrait Gallery. Yeah, right. It measures 28 by 22, and it wasn't clear anything more about it, except at the bottom there was a quote from John Howard Sandon, who's a famous portrait painter, saying, "Margaret, congratulations, this is a great portrait." So just by coincidence, John Howard Sandon painted my portrait, my official portrait for the U.S. Treasury. So I know John Howard Sandon, and I figured, I'm going to call up and find out about his affiliation with Margaret Holland Sargent. But before I did, I thought I need to find out more about this. So I said, "Janice, I want to talk to the curator at the National Portrait Gallery." And so, it's amazing, how the right words open up doors to you. So Janice called the curator's office and said, "Former Secretary of the Treasury would like to talk to the curator," and she was instantly on the phone. If she told him it was Paul O'Neill, I probably would have had to wait a couple of months. Anyway, she came on the phone and I told her the story about, I have this painting and it says it's in your collection at the National Portrait Gallery. And it says it's 28 by 22, and I've measured the painting I've got here, and it's 24 by 20. And she said, you know, Ms. Secretary, we're in the middle of launching a new exhibit. And this is a very fascinating story, and I want to deal with it, but I'm going to be a week or 10 days before I'm going to have time to look into this and figure it out. So I said, okay. And so I wasn't done, so I figured I've got a name of a person who painted this, and I Googled her. And it turns out Margaret Holland Sargent lives in Hollywood, California. She's 83 years old, and when you speak to her on the phone, it's like speaking to a 33-year-old. She's lively and spry, and I told her why I was calling, that I had this painting and it's this big mystery. And I said to her, now, the National Portrait Gallery website says it's 28 by 22, and the one I have is 24 by 20. And did you paint more than one of these? And she said, no, I only painted one, and it's 24 by 20. So then, you know, a couple of things went through my mind. One thing that went through my mind is I now possess stolen property. And what the hell am I going to do? Oh, so Margaret said, when you figure this out, please call me and tell me. So I called John Howard Sandon, and he said, indeed, Margaret and I and his wife and maybe 20 other people were members of a portrait society group in New York in the 1970s. And when Margaret painted this painting, he saw it and made that compliment that now appears on the National Gallery website. And he said, Paul, she is the real deal. She is really an excellent artist. And when I talked to her, I discovered that she had painted it as a cover for the Time magazine. And interestingly, it never appeared actually on the cover of Time magazine, but it did appear in Time magazine in 1976 when they ran a special feature on U.S. presidents, and it was published there. It's the only place I can find it was ever published. So Margaret told me she painted this painting overnight. You know, as an amateur painter, I can't tell you. You know, it makes me want to burn my brushes. That somebody could do this magnificent thing overnight. And so finally the National Portrait Gallery person called me back very graciously. And she said, we actually have a special curator for Time magazine covers. And we've exhaustively checked our files and all of the records we have, and we can't find that we've ever actually had possession of the painting you're talking about. And we've also talked to our people, and we don't think we have any rights to it. And so it's yours. And so I didn't tell you a little story. I have to wing my way back for a minute and say, my son runs a hedge fund, and he's got workspace close by me in the same space. And when he saw this painting, and I was saying, oh my God, look at this, Paul, he said, I know where it goes, and he got a hook and hung it up in our conference room. So that's where the painting was. So I said, you know, yeah, well, that's really cool, Paul, but it's not the right thing. What the right thing is for, I already have an engagement scheduled to go to Grand Rapids to commemorate President Ford's 102nd birthday. And I want to take this portrait with me and give it to Susan Ford and let her decide what should be done with it, with my suggesting that it would be wonderful for it to hang in the museum in Grand Rapids, where people can see it every day. So that's my radical surprise for today. I thank you all so much for letting me come here. I feel increasingly like I'm part of the Grand Rapids family, and for a long time I felt like I was part of the Ford family. Thank you all very much, and God bless you. Okay.
I'm going to let you be in the middle this time.
Right, thank you.
It's become our custom when somebody shares with us what Paul has to give them a very, very special award. There's a statue of President Ford in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol. There was a maquette made in order to model and build that statue. And from that maquette, there were 8 different busts that were lifted. And we have something here very special, Paul, for you. Susan, will you do the honors?
This is for you, Paul, to thank you so much for. So we're taking the painting and you're getting it.
Thank you, Paul. Again, that's something very, very special that we haven't seen much like that before. Next up is another very exciting opportunity for us. I'm going to ask for the delegation from Grand Valley State University to come up on the dais. First of all, we have the provost, who's Gail Davis. We have the Grand Valley State chairman of the Board of Trustees, who also happens to be an associate trustee of the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Museum, David Hooker, and the Grand Valley State Hauenstein Center Director, Gleaves Whitney. Will the three of you please come up to share with us your presentation for this year? Please, welcome on board.
Wow, what an experience to be part of that. Thank you so much. We're just delighted to be here to commemorate the President's 102nd birthday, and thanks to the Ford family and to Joe Calvaruzzo and the folks at the foundation, and also to the library and museum for throwing another great bash that has such a surprise ending. I'm proud to be joined on stage, of course, by Chairman David Hooker and our Provost, Gail Davis, for the last phase of this afternoon's program. Now, there's a man who wanted to be in the audience with us today who couldn't make it, but he just celebrated a 103rd birthday. It's Ralph Hauenstein. And yeah, please recognize Ralph. Now, Ralph and President Ford have been friends. They had been friends for 80 years. I actually counted it up. If you go back to the time when they were competing against each other on the gridiron, all the way up to when they were sharing their last cocktail and reminiscing about West Michigan, some 80 years of friendship. And they cherished that friendship. You can see the letters that prove it. And one of the things that President Ford really valued about Ralph was that he was a leader in every sector that he entered. If you look at all of the ways that Ralph led, if you look at the way he was a civic and media leader when he was at the Grand Rapids Herald as a city editor, when you looked at how in World War II, in the European theater under Dwight Eisenhower, he was the chief of the intelligence branch. When you look at the fact that after the war, he was an entrepreneurial leader with global business connections, and then he comes back to West Michigan and he's a philanthropic leader. Look at all of the foundations and the institutions in this community in West Michigan that have been affected by his leadership, impacted. Hauenstein Center for Presidential Studies being just one of those. He was a leader in his church as well, of international repute. Now, Ralph never held public office, but he had a keen eye for people who would be good at it, people who had the integrity to take a stand and stick with it, where their word was their bond. And he recognized that in a fellow war veteran in 1948 when Jerry Ford wanted to run for Congress. And Ralph's support of Jerry Ford was steadfast all the way through 1976, 1980, and beyond the presidency. So the lives of these two American heroes, Ralph and Jerry Ford, are intertwined in a very important and organic way in this community. And they provide the context for why there is a Colonel Ralph W. Hauenstein Fellowship that is offered by Grand Valley State University, our Hauenstein Center. It's our most prestigious award that we hand out at the Hauenstein Center. It is directed to Americans of stature, Americans who have devoted their lives to serving our nation. Well, Secretary O'Neill, if you would please come and join us one more time up on stage. Ralph and the Hauenstein Center are proud to recognize you for all the ways that you have served our nation, going back to 1961 with the Kennedy administration forward. You have made a real mark by your integrity and your public service, and you've made America stand a little bit taller on the world stage as a result. And we thank you and we honor you. Yes, please. I've just got to say, now Ralph wanted me to say this. Now this is not an end-of-life award. By Ralph's standards, you are still a youngster, and he expects a lot more of you. Okay.
So thank you all so much. I will value this the rest of my life and greatly appreciate having an honor from such a distinguished person. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. In our promise to you to conclude in an expeditious manner, we'd like to thank you for being here. We'd like to thank all of our sponsors for their contributions making this possible. And most importantly, Paul, we want to thank you for not only your gift, but sharing with us insights from your heart and your mind, much in the same manner that Jerry Ford would have done. And I also want to salute the 10,000 people that call Vietnam their ancestral home, who are part of this community here. I've had the opportunity to work and engage with them, and I can't think of a more fitting start to our program than what we saw here today, and the presentation that was up on the screen about the baby lift, and all the refugees that were brought to this community. The churches opened up their doors, gave them a place to come, and even though many thousands of them have left to go elsewhere, they've continued to keep about 10,000 as their representation in this community. And so this is indeed a very, very special day, and I can't thank all of you enough. So thank you for being here. God bless you all.